Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in BC. His website, icba.ca. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Jordan, we're in the middle of an election campaign in Canada. Have any of the major federal parties said or done anything that makes you think, oh, they've got their eye on small and mid-sized businesses, which by a vast majority provide most of the jobs in Canada?
Whew, not much. I mean, it is slim pickings if you're a small business owner looking for help from a government or even just a political party that really understands you. We've seen giant announcements. We've seen huge, billionaire taxes announced by the NDP. We've seen giant, changes to, Fortune 500 style companies as far as board representation by the Conservatives. But we've seen relatively little when it comes to actually helping small businesses. I'll note one tax change that's been suggested or is in a platform. The Conservatives did come forward, and they're pitching a December GST holiday where they cut the GST, I think, from 5% to 2%. And the idea there is to get people spending, actually companies more than people, spending some of their surplus in December in order to keep the economy going, give you an opportunity to save money on major purchases, but also reinvest that money into your company and other things. So that's been the one outlier policy. It hasn't got a lot of attention. I think maybe the media think it's a little bit gimmicky, but
I saw a breakdown. It would save the average family $33.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would save you an average of $33, but it might save you more if you plan to purchase for that period, right? Like, if you knew next year that you needed a new refrigerator, as a middle class family, would you wait for December and order it then so that you would save that 3 points? Might be worthwhile, right? If you're looking to add an air conditioner to your house, you remember the heat dome, you're like, geez, we got to get air conditioning this year, or
buy a car.
Summer. Yeah, buy a car. That is a significant thing. So yeah, it saves the average family $33, and some people will be like, wow, $33, who cares? It's not even a lunch out at McDonald's anymore.
But if you could plan a year ahead, you're right. You could actually do some damage or help your bank account.
Exactly. And think of what the sales could be like. Think of the marketing materials for those companies. Like, there's a lot of things that could be done in that December window.
Sure. If there's still 2% GST, then I'll pay that for you. Exactly.
They'll waive it or whatever. Or, yeah, it would create a lot of competition. It gives a little kickstart to the economy at a time where people are kind of deciding, like, am I just going to hold my dollars over and maybe spend them next year or invest them in something else? Yeah. Maybe it gives them a chance to spend it instead.
Also, the latest polls show the Conservatives in a virtual tie with the Liberals, in some cases slightly ahead. But as in the last election, the Conservatives got a majority of the votes. But, of course, with the first-past-the-post riding system, if you get 1 million votes in one riding, it doesn't, as long as you win by one vote, all those extra votes don't mean anything. Yeah,
that's right. Ironically, I think it was Justin Trudeau who once campaigned and said this would be the last election under first-past-the-post. Then it elected him, and he thought, first-past-the-post is pretty good. Maybe I'll keep it. That's an interesting phenomenon that happens with politicians a lot. Yeah, you're right. It comes down to how, where your votes are. Are they, in strategic places? I don't know. It's a Canadian election. It's all going to come down to the suburbs around Toronto, the vote-rich 905 area. If the Conservatives are competitive there and can pick off seats from the Liberals, they'll have a very good chance to form a government, minority, or even a majority. And if they don't, well, then the Liberals will hang on to power. But I think in the coming weeks, we're going to see a lot more focus shift to the 905 area of Toronto. Now, that said, that could actually be good for small business, because I think there are a lot of small business owners in and around those areas, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who work in Toronto. So it is plausible that we could see some better policies come out of the push to get those voters.
Now, a policy that Britain had, I don't know if they still did, but it really made their small businesses boom, and that was they didn't have to pay any taxes for 5 years until they could actually prove they were profitable. Because, you might bring in $1 million, but if your tax bill is added on top of your loans and startup costs, you lost money that year, yet you still had to pay taxes. Would that be the kind of policy you'd like to see in Canada?
Look, everything should be on the table and worth a look. One thing about Canada is our tax structure is incredibly complicated and has not been properly reviewed in a long time. And you get these governments who kind of come in and out with boutique tax credits, and you see it every year when you fill out your own income taxes, right? You're like, your transit passes, taxable this year or not? I can't remember. And these things change from year to year depending on what government is in power and who they're trying to buy support from. There's long been a need for and it sounds really boring to the average person, which is why it never happens. There's long been a need for a Royal Commission on Taxation in Canada, an independent group to take a look at taxes from the very, the high reaches of federal government down to your local government, and figure out what the actual tax burden are, where the loopholes are, how to make the tax system simpler, how to make it more efficient, how to make sure that taxes are actually accomplishing the things that you want them to accomplish. We've long needed a tax commission, and ideas like that could be fed into it. The problem, of course, is that governments are always very hesitant to give up any tax tools. They'd like to just quietly raise taxes and move on. So they don't really want to talk about those things that are happening.
Yes, and as a lot of people like to point out, you used to point out when you were with the Taxpayers Federation, there's only one taxpayer, yet governments, Ottawa considers them to be one taxpayer, and then municipality, another one, perhaps county taxes, something that Canadians have to pay, 2 municipal taxes plus provincial tax. And then you have federal excise taxes on top of that and the federal fuel tax. So all these different layers of taxation. And what's more, when they do the official CPI, I think taxation is not one of the official numbers they crunch.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, how many times have you heard from your municipal government, the tax increase we're limiting to $50 this year. That's like a cup of coffee a day. But then, you hear from ICBC and they're taking a cup of coffee, and IBC Hydro's taking a little more, and your provincial tax is going up, and the sales tax is going up, and then the feds raise that. And all of a sudden you're like, man, there's a lot of cups of coffee I've just lost out on, because you have to pay all the taxes at different levels. Again, putting all these folks in a room and making them actually talk about these issues, talk about competitiveness as a country and how our tax structure is very uncompetitive compared to the United States, it would be an exercise that reporters would hate because they would find it dull. But I honestly think it could spark real positive change, especially for the people who are taking risks and entrepreneurs, and just see everyday families trying to get by in Canada.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman, talking about taxation, the NDP proposal to put a tax on the super rich to help pay for services for lower income Canadians. Just how many billionaires' pockets do they plan to pluck?
This is one of these classic ideas, right? There must be so many billionaires in Canada. We got to get all that money, right? And the NDP failed to realize, you could actually get all of the billionaires of Canada in a room and you'd still be under the COVID limit for 50 people in a room. There are 47 Canadians who are billionaires. 47. Now, they're very wealthy, and most of them have seen increases in the past few years. That includes People like the Thompsons, Jimmy Pattison, the Shopify founder, Galen Weston. Okay, that's great. So you can tax them more, but it's 47 people. So you start doing the math, right? Okay, if you tax them each, $10 million, just decide, congratulations, you're going to pay an extra $10 million taxes. By the way, they already pay more in taxes than, most people because we have a progressive tax system. But you're still, you're talking about, chump change in the overall, face of $1 trillion deficit or $1 trillion debt. So, yes, okay, I'm not shedding any tears for billionaires. Sure, they can pay more. There are two things to keep in mind. Number one, I don't want to chase billionaires out of Canada. We want them in Canada. We want them doing things like Shopify here. We want them investing here. We want them employing people here, taking entrepreneurial risk here, investing venture capital here, all of those things. So you got to be very careful you don't build something where they can just go to, private island or, the United States or Florida or wherever. You want to keep them in Canada. And then number two, there just aren't that many of them. And yeah, okay. Yeah, so, the 47 billionaires don't vote for you. That's great, but, you at some point, you got to connect the dots. You can't keep making giant promises like, we'll fund everything back to these 47 billionaires, because there just simply aren't enough of them to fund the massive increase in spending that you're proposing.
Yes, I used to call it the eat the rich syndrome, or the old classic fairy tale, eat the goose that laid the golden egg. Mm-hmm. Billionaires are the kind of people, they don't have to live here if the tax regime is too onerous. They can very easily just live anywhere they want in the world, and they don't have to become a resident of anywhere. Go live on a super yacht. You don't pay any taxes.
Mm-hmm. No, you're exactly right. So, they are very mobile. They are very smart. They know how to get away from taxes if they need to. So yeah, you got to be very careful you don't chase them away. It's such a fine line, right? The Taxpayers Federation, we used to talk about how in a neighborhood where everyone has a red door, a tax on blue doors is very popular. But, how many blue doors are there? How many billionaires actually are there? Not enough to really turn the tide in the kind of spending that you need.
Also, picking on particular sectors, putting massive taxes on foreign real estate buyers. Why didn't they do that when that was a factor in real estate back in 2013, 14, 15, 16? There are no foreign buyers right now. They can't even get into the country.
That's exactly it, which is probably why they're bringing this policy forward now. They feel safe in doing so. Look, one of the things that we've heard at the Collin Commission on money laundering and looking at some of these issues with money coming from overseas was that the federal government was falling down on its responsibilities. FinTrack doesn't seem to be up to speed. RCMP didn't seem to be fully staffed. They were having troubles getting federal officers to enforce things. So, there's a lot on the federal plate that could be done to control money flowing in if they wanted. But you're exactly right. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, I'm going to give you one more stat on the eat the rich thing, Jim, before I go. There's the richest 0.2% of Canadians, and this is a CCPA number, so this is the lefties' own number. The wealthiest 2.2% of Canadians, it's about 25,000 households. They control about $1.5 trillion of the country's wealth. So put that in perspective. If you tax them at 100%, you basically seized their assets of the wealthiest 0.2%, the wealthiest 25,000 households. You would barely pay down the national debt. That's how far the spending has gone out of control in Canada. So, the numbers just don't work. The math doesn't work that way. You've got to be smart as to how you're actually taxing folks.
What kind of policies would you like to see being proposed by our federal politicians to make sure, because I just saw the latest stats, our economy shrunk last quarter. They thought it was going to grow by, 2 or 3%. It shrunk 1.1%. What can they do to keep it from shrinking anymore and then keep it healthy?
They need to look at measures that encourage entrepreneurism. It's shrinking because people are afraid to take risks anymore because there's so much out of their control during the COVID period. So many decisions were made and poorly communicated. They were shut down for reasons that were beyond their control. And look, public health, it makes sense if you got to shut down an industry or whatever. But how do you draw those people back? how do you make entrepreneurialism and risk-taking and going out and starting your own business attractive to Generation Z? These are the things that they should be looking at. How do you train a workforce? How do you make sure people are upskilling as best you can? How do you make sure people are, finding their way to meaningful, happy, fulfilling jobs? That in the context of, it is still work, right? Like, it's not play, it is work. It's not going to be, hunky-dory all the time. These are the things that government should be looking at, like this shift. Where are we going to get more workers from? Honestly, we should probably be encouraging more immigration, simply because, we're an aging demographic, an aging country, and we need more people here to work. More people to come and enjoy the Canadian dream and take part in it and start those small businesses that we all love and rely on in our community. So there's lots of opportunities there. The question is, is government willing, is any political party willing to actually do the things like increase immigration and talk about these issues? I'm not sure they are.
Right, and I just saw a survey done by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. They say small businesses, mid-sized businesses connected to the service industry, on average, owe over $330,000 each.
Oof, wow. That's scary, right? You're putting everything on the line. I have a friend I've known for years. He worked at a local golf club where I did wedding ceremonies, and he's just struck out on his own and started his own restaurant. It's always been his dream to have a big restaurant with lots of craft beers on tap. It's called the Barley Merchant in Langley, BC. And, COVID threw him for a loop. He decides to start this business just before COVID lands, and it's taken him just until, the past month to get the shop up and running, to get people in there. People love it. But, I worry about him because he's, I don't know his finances or anything like that, but his wings could be clipped at any time by another lockdown, another crazy set of regulations, another, onerous, well-meaning but, blind to the plight of the entrepreneur decision. And then it doesn't matter how good his service is or how good his location is or how good his menu is. It's a force outside his control, and he's put everything on the line for this business. So, yeah, it's one of these things that government, it's really easy when you're in government to think everyone lives like you and not to really understand that, no, there are people who are risking everything, their family's financial future on a venture, and you should be bending over backwards to be respectful of that, and we've got to find ways to help them succeed.
Jordan, are you still looking for people in the construction trades?
Are we ever? Talked to a business owner this morning, desperate for workers. ICBA.ca/jobs. If you're a worker, you can put your resume in there. We can connect you. We can have you working on a site Monday morning, getting training and getting ready to go, because our crews are still short-staffed here. It's been difficult the past year and a half because of COVID, but construction has continued on at a pace that we're really proud of. It's been very safe. Very few COVID outbreaks on construction sites. There is opportunity there if you want it. So ICBA.ca/jobs.
Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in British Columbia. His website, ICBA.ca. And if you're looking for a construction job, they can probably hook you up. If you have any questions for Jordan or any of our other guests, we'll ask that question for you if you send it to info@howstreet.com, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @TalkDigitalNet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.